Hello, welcome to another episode of Montana Shares, your opportunity to find out about the nonprofits that make the state so great. I'm your host, Bill Crane, and today I have Mary with Prickly Pear Land Trust with me. Welcome, Mary.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Great. So you're at a 20-year anniversary. Tell us what you've been doing for the last 20 years, just kind of the high-level view of the whole thing.
Great. Prickly Pear Land Trust has been working in this community for 20 years. We focus our work on trails, and actually in the past, one of the big initiatives was to secure more of the parkland that establish the land base for what is now the South Hills Trail Network. That's the backdrop of the city of Helena and the state capitol building. So it's really an iconic project that Prickly Pear has been focusing on for quite a while. We just wrapped up that first phase of the backdrop initiative, and that project was a major focus for the last 20 years, as well as the trail development and building and getting folks into the outdoors and working with partners in the community to build and strengthen the land trust. So yeah, it's been a really amazing 20 years. We have wonderful support from partners and people in the community, and yeah, it's been really great.
And I mean, it's one thing to say we have these trails and whatnot, but then the flip side of that is we're like mountain bike rated silver or something. There's these results that are coming out of it. People are coming to Helena specifically for our trail systems, right?
Yeah. So I like to share a story. I went on a ride with a group called Girls Thrive. They're one of our partners. They help girls be comfortable in the outdoors, girls of all ages. It's a really great organization. And I asked the girls, who were ranged in ages from about 10 to maybe 16, what they loved about living here. And they raised their hands, and some of them said, I really love that it's beautiful, or I love that I can fish and hunt, or some of them said, I love the trails. Obviously, a lot of them love to ride. And to me, that really spoke to all of the work that Prickly Pear Land Trust does. We make our community better. We help the economy, the local economy, thrive. The work that we do supports, better quality of life, health, happiness, things like that are all directly tied to places where there's a robust land trust. You tend to find higher levels of quality of life and happiness and health. So really the things that the girls at the Girls Thrive ride said were, I mean, they
gave you your mission statement right back to you in a way.
Exactly, yeah.
Cool, that's great.
So, yeah.
So what's been your biggest accomplishment of the last year?
So in the last year, Prickly Pear Land Trust has seen a really incredible amount of opportunity in the way of new projects, opportunity in the way of new funding, and growth within our organization to a point where we can really expand our work in all three of the program areas that we operate. So we have a really robust trails program. We are one of, I think we're basically the only land trust in the state that really grew up in trails. A lot of the other land trusts start out in private land conservation and work their way into trails eventually, but Prickly Pear is kind of the opposite, and in some ways, I feel really fortunate that my predecessor, Andy Bauer, and the board 20 years ago had the foresight to realize that the lands that now hold the South Hills would be highly sought after for home development. And if Prickly Pear hadn't acquired some of that land, we wouldn't have the trail system that we do today. So the fact that we did that when the opportunity was there has really, in my mind, laid the foundation for us to just continue to do more now in some of the other areas as well. And so our trails program is really robust. We have a private land conservation program where we are just about to wrap up the largest conservation easement on a really historic, iconic ranch in the Canyon Creek area.
Okay.
And that ranch it's about a 3,000 acre ranch, but it'll preserve the wildlife habitat. There's a huge elk herd that uses that land. It's a working farm and ranch, which is a really important thing for the ag economy here. And most importantly, it's helping that private landowner also achieve his goals to keep the land in working hands and to keep it ranching.
Mm-hmm.
And then in our sort of newer program that we have just started to kind of see more opportunity in the last few years is the program we're referring to it as community conservation. Mm-hmm. That term in the conservation community is not a new one, but it is a little bit new for us as we start to talk about what are the ways that a land trust can engage and address the needs of our broader community and bring benefit to a more diverse stakeholder group, to new geographies within the communities where we serve, to new places, and how can we also diversify some of the partnerships that beyond what we have typically had. And so in the community conservation program, we have a new acquisition out by Fort Harrison called the Peaks to Creeks project that seeks to, through that acquisition we acquired about 560 acres mm-hmm. out near Fort Harrison, in between Fort Harrison and 10 Mile Creek. So it covers along 10 Mile Creek and 7 Mile Creek. Through that acquisition, we are helping to bring benefit to a lot of different user groups that Prickly Pear's never worked with before. The veteran community in particular is right there out at the VA hospital. Mm-hmm. It's the only place in the state where veterans can receive treatment for PTSD and the substance abuse programs. That's the only hospital in the state where those programs exist. And the doctors there have reached out to Prickly Pear Land Trust to find ways that we can use that new acquisition that has access to the creek mm-hmm. to help those veterans spend time outdoors. Research is starting to show that veterans who spend time outdoors when they have issues with PTSD or with some of the other challenges that they face when they come home, they have higher success rates eventually if they spend time in the outdoors versus using pharmaceuticals. That's what some of the mm-hmm. doctors have been sharing with us. So it's a really great opportunity out there for that community to benefit from this acquisition, but also for Prickly Pear to figure out how we as a land trust here can do more to better serve our community. That's one of the new user groups. The other new sort of partnership for us is with Spring Meadow Resources, and mm-hmm. they service folks with developmental disabilities. And right now, where that property sits, it's just across the creek from our acquisition. It's just on the other side of 10 Mile Creek. There isn't really great access, believe it or not, for the folks that live at Spring Meadow Resources. Our acquisition is going to improve the accessibility beyond just their property. Once we have a bridge in place and trails in place, the folks who live out there will be able to cross the creek and explore a big wide open field that mm-hmm. they've never had access to before. And those things have really positive benefits for the folks with disabilities. So it's been a really exciting thing right. for us to kind of figure out how we as a land trust can help diversity of constituents in our community beyond those who we typically serve or who we have served in the past.
So trail junkies like me,
yeah.
what are we going to get out of the same acquisition? There'll be trails along
yep.
it presumably, and what kind of distance are we looking at?
Right now we're looking at 4 to 5 miles of new trails. These trails will be a little bit like the ones that are at Spring Meadow Lake. Mm-hmm. They'll be natural, but they will be crushed granite and to ADA standards so that the grade works for folks who have disabilities or who are wheelchair bound or who are elderly and need more of that flat surface or that kind of thing. The idea of the naming for Peaks to Creeks was that we would connect the trails in the South Hills with the valley bottoms along the creeks, and then there isn't, really great trail development yet in the scratch gravels, but we're hoping someday that, maybe there will be, and that could connect there as well. So it's a really great opportunity for new trail development, but trail development in more of an urban sense that will, again, serve kind of a broader subset of the community. The South Hills trails for the real endurance or the mountain bike rider trail folks, of which I am one of them, they will just continue to get better and better. We do have a silver rated, according to the International Mountain Biking Association, trail system, which also sees, huge amounts of use from hikers and walkers and dog walkers. And we're really lucky that we have such a gem. That system will continue to improve, every step of the way. This new acquisition out along 10 and 7 Mile Creek will just provide a new type of outdoor recreation for other folks in the community, and probably some who use the South Hills as well.
Right. So is there going to be kind of a new trailhead connectivity? I know that the Centennial Trail just has pushed all the way out to Wild, Montana, which is awfully close to Spring Meadow Resources and stuff. So are we going to get to connect those two up maybe?
Yes. Yeah. So that is exactly, that was actually one of the really great opportunities that came about this last year, that it was already in place and the planning was already, done to establish that 2016 connection of the Centennial Trail out to Montana Wild, which is where it ends now. But with this acquisition, we will pick the trail up there, and then it'll continue out across 10 Mile Creek, and it'll go all the way out to the VA and the National Guard side of the fort. It's a really awesome opportunity for folks who like to either commute by bike, especially for those who work out at the fort. There's about 1,100 people who work between the VA and the National Guard side of the fort. They'll now have a really great commuter path to get, to and from work. But then also there's a huge component of folks in the community who use and will hopefully use that area now for just basic everyday recreation or exercise. But yeah, it'll connect up with the terminus of the extension at Montana Wild and go out there through the meadow and across the creek.
Super.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I take my grandkids out on Centennial Trail and we always have a great time.
Yeah.
It's a great entry level for the younger kids to do some distance on a bike or whatever.
Yeah.
So what can the community do to be involved with what Prickly Pear Land Trust does?
So Prickly Pear Land Trust wouldn't be where we are today if it weren't for the hundreds and hundreds of volunteers who help us do the work that we do every single year. Those volunteers do everything from help build or maintain trail. They help us deal with some of the noxious weeds in the South Hills. We have volunteers who help us put on the Don't Fence Me In trail run that Prickly Pear does in May every year. We also have volunteers who help out with our major event that we just wrapped up a couple of weekends ago, Harvest Moon. That's our largest, our auction and dinner. And we have volunteers who help us with things around the office. We have literally hundreds of folks who help Prickly Pear do what we do every year in the community, and we wouldn't be able to do what we could if it weren't for that. We also have, because of some of these increased things that we're providing to the community, the increased acquisitions, some of the new trail development, those projects all require higher levels of support that our organization has to raise in the community. And there are lots of ways to give that way as well. But yeah, it's really, we wouldn't be where we were if it weren't for all of the various types of support that we see every year from this community.
Great. So crystal ball time, you've put 20 years in, you've got 20 years in the future, you've been doing some little visioning, you said earlier. So what's the vision for the next 20 years?
Yeah, well, and just to So I have been at Prickly Pear Land Trust for about 18 months or so. Prior to that, I was at the Nature Conservancy for a lot of years, but I did, my husband and I actually both grew up here in Helena, so it's really pretty awesome to be back here kind of doing the things that we love. But also, we probably wouldn't be here if it weren't for the trails and the work of Prickly Pear Land Trust. That was one of the main draws to come back to Helena for sure, aside from the awesome family, networks that we have here. But yeah, so in my, my perspective for the next 20 years, I think, is that we have worked so diligently over the last 20 to establish a really solid foundation for community involvement and engagement in a way that, the sky's really the limit, I think, for Prickly Pear Land Trust. People live and work and play in Montana for the things that land trusts do. We protect the wide open spaces and the working farms and ranches, and we make possible things like outdoor recreation through trails and park acquisitions and things like that. So, I would envision that in the next 20 years, we will continue to bring more of those things to all of the communities that we serve. And Prickly Pear Land Trust operates in Lewis and Clark County primarily for now, but I could see that growing into some of the other more rural, maybe even parts of our service area. And the other counties in the service area are Jefferson, Broadwater, and Powell counties. And those, I try and think about what our communities are going to look like in 20 years. There's probably going to be a fair bit of growth. There will probably be a lot of change in what we see today. And so we actually talk quite a bit about how are we going to make sure that we are addressing challenges and finding solutions to the things in communities that are changing, but also how are we bringing really awesome benefit that makes these places so wonderful to live and play. And I feel like we have a really good connection with this community, so we'll continue to hear that input and feedback and be as responsive as we possibly can to do everything that we can to make that continue.
Great. Well, I think that's great. I personally use our trail system a lot. I appreciate the work that you guys do all the time. And I appreciate you coming on the show today and telling us a little bit what's going on with your group.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
So thank you for coming on. I'd like to thank everyone else for tuning in tonight and listening to this. And have a great day.